Welcome to the 15-Minute Patriot Podcast. I am Ross, the Dude Maher from Rhode Island. I am joined by my colleagues, Dave the Wild Man Wilder from southeastern Massachusetts, and David Sod from the free state of Florida. We know there are many outlets and sites for you to collect your news from, but here at 15-Minute Patriot, we focus on what the news should prompt you to do. We focus on action steps. Knowledge is important, but citizenship requires action. So even if you will take just 15 minutes a month, you will be pleasantly surprised to see what you can accomplish. We, the people, are at the top of our government, and it's time to get involved. Lastly, we want to hear from you and about the things that you've done. So you can email us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. That's 15minutepatriot@gmail.com, or on Facebook at 15-Minute Patriot. And with that, we are going to lead off with an audio of Representative Hageman on the Black Conservative 24 handle.
This explains everything.
So is the Doge program targeted at these bureaucrats?
Yes.
And so what can you expect?
Well, let's look at the Department of Education. The Federal Department of Education has a budget of about $280 billion a year. Less than 25% goes to educating our students. So where does the other $220 billion go? It goes to a bureaucracy. It goes to a consultant, and that consultant then donates money back to the Democrats, and then it goes to a different consultant, and then it goes to an NGO. I mean, it is money laundering and money churning at its absolute best, and you can look at almost every single agency and you will find it. So the brilliance of Doge isn't that he's going in and cutting spending. He doesn't have the authority to do that. We're the ones that have the authority to do that. What I want him to do is come up with a report, go through agency by agency by agency, identify every single program that we should not be funding, put a number attached to it. We slap a preamble on the front of that report, and we say that every single agency is having their budget cut by X amount as shown in the attached report, and none of those programs can go forward from here on out.
And this is why Democrats are losing their minds over Elon Musk.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
An American vote.
So here we have somebody in Congress saying this is how things are working. I just find that mind-boggling.
The first
Yeah.
person who's come forward and admitted it, and completely admitted it, that this is what's going on. To take it even a step further, they're dumping money into NGOs, and those are nothing but laundering companies. That's all they are, laundering organizations.
The sick part, though, think about it. Think about what you just said there. Finally, someone is coming out and talking about it. So now I look at, I'll just say all the conservatives. I'll even point the finger directly to the Speaker of the House. So is there a suggestion that even the Speaker of the House currently knew that this, what she just described, is actually going on, and has not said necessarily a word about it, at least not publicly the way that she has? It makes me wonder how many people understand the spider web that we're talking about here.
It certainly gives some structure to how all the politicians in Congress in Washington somehow retire with huge buckets of money. They have a reasonable salary, but when they retire, they have 10 times what they earned in salary. And this gives kind of a process of how it might be occurring.
Well, wouldn't that be, if it was investigated, wouldn't that show up? Like, how does AOC go from having about $2,000, $3,000 in her bank account, or $8,000, I forgot what it was, and now she's up to like $16 to $20 million in a couple of years? She's been elected twice. That's 4 years, and she's made that kind of money. I would love to know how she's picking her stocks, if that's what she's doing, how it makes her money. It's just
Well, and that's an interesting point too, because depending on what committees you're serving on or your certain things that you're tracking, you basically have inside knowledge as to how the government is going to spend its money. And if you can get in at the bottom, especially like in defense contractors, as an example, if they're going to be getting, I had a family member who worked for General Dynamics as a carpenter, right? Building submarines. But General Dynamics is a publicly traded company. And so
Yeah.
if you know that they're going to be getting, a 3 submarine contract or an aircraft carrier contract or whatever the case may be, and you're able to get in at a lower level, yeah, I mean, your stocks could really climb.
Yeah, but I think this is more direct than that. So here's a story from Free Beacon. The headline is Biden-backed Green Group wired $651 million in taxpayer money to credit union accounts. The EPA says it has no oversight of the funds. So what this does is somebody say, "Oh, we're going to send all this money to our connections in credit unions because they're going to loan out the money for green projects."
Yeah,
Really?
right.
And
And
they
you
don't
know-
keep track of it. And they don't keep track of it.
For the EPA to say, I have the headline here too. The second part of it, the EPA says it now has no oversight over the funds. That
Correct.
in and of itself is a violation of law. Let me explain at least my own experience with it. When I was in the military, I had responsibility for a particular pot of money that came from the Department of Justice. I know that requires much more explanation. I'm not going to get into it now. The bottom line is I had an oversight responsibility on those dollars. One of the things that could be done with those dollars is we could, for all intents and purposes, grant it to a police department. If we did, or any type of activity where we were basically granting money out, I still had a responsibility as to how those dollars were ultimately used, even though I was not a member of that entity that was receiving those dollars. So for the EPA, and this isn't like DOJ policy, this is U.S. government policy for all types of grant dollars, or just funding in general. You have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that those dollars are used as intended. I can't understand how the EPA can say they have no oversight of the funds. That's insanity to me.
Yeah, it's like a dereliction of their duties in that position. But with all of the Doge findings, and unless I missed something, not one politician has called it lies. All they've talked about is the process to which Doge is going through. That's what's got them upset. But they have never said that he's lying, because the facts and the math just bear him out. And then Maxine Waters makes that comment one day. We don't know what he has on us. Whoa, what do you mean you don't know what he has on you? Should he have anything on you, Maxine? I mean, God almighty, this gets more and more interesting, but yet I still have to see a hammer come down, boys. I've got to see some people get indicted.
Yeah.
I have to. I mean,
it just seems to get worse and worse. I mean, you keep reading in this article. There was $20 billion with a B in greenhouse gas reduction funds just parked in an outside financial institution. Just, a slush fund out there for the people in the know to use. They're looking at
Act Blue.
Act Blue.
Right. That's a money laundering machine for the Democrat Party, for God's sakes.
They even admit that they're a money laundering machine for the party.
Yeah, and then
Biden why do you say that?
He awards $28 million to a mysterious vaccine company run by a COVID advisor and based out of Maryland with a P.O. box number. What companies? That's all they have, are P.O. box numbers. I mean, there's no address, nothing. That money just goes there, and it's like recently the SBA come up with that finding where they're giving millions of dollars to 11-year-old kids and a 9-month-old baby. It's like, how did you expect them to pay it back? It's pathetic.
What kind of grant did the baby write to get the money?
Yeah, right. And then how about the 9-month-old who got $100,000 for
or the 9-year-old? That's pretty good.
Yeah, but yet they're not calling it a lie. They're just saying they don't like the fact that he's looking at it. Except every single not every single, but the last 4 or 5 administrations have all said they wanted to do the exact same thing. Boys, I'm frustrated.
But then you got to ask yourself, okay, you're right. I've seen the footage of Al Gore saying, explaining, well, Mr. President, the reason why we can't get things done, and they've got all the forklifts with all these pallets of paper and all that other type of stuff.
The
budget. And so you really, almost want to peel back the layers of the onion and try to okay, why weren't they able to? I mean, Bill Clinton, as I remember it, and it was more Newt Gingrich, who was the Speaker of the House at the time, got us to a balanced budget versus the president. But the commentary is still there. Try to reduce basically the size and the scope of the federal government. Clinton tried to do it. Bush talked about doing it. Obama talked about doing it. So it makes you wonder, why weren't they able to make any type of headway?
In my opinion, they were all complicit. It's a lot of. It's like what Obama said. Well, that's campaigning. Now it's governing. It's the same thing. I'm going to campaign on that, but it's never going to get done. Because once I'm president and once I'm in office, I can just say, appoint somebody and just say, okay, go have a cup of coffee for the next 4 years. We'll talk to you later.
Sure.
I mean, it's just example after example. In Town Hall, they published an article by Jeremy Frankel, billions given to months-old charity by 375 billion EPA slush fund. So this company, Climate United Fund in Bethesda, Maryland, doesn't appear on an IRS charities database and doesn't have any federal filings. It was given a check for almost $7 billion by Harris. The fund was only incorporated in Delaware in November 2023 and was given the check in April 2024.
How do you justify that? How do you rationalize it?
How do you do that? I mean, you have to prove that it's illegal, but how can it not be? How can it not be illegal?
How do you act? All of us have incorporated businesses of one kind or another, right? So we understand that process of how to set up a legal, whether it's an S corp, a C corp, or a 503, or an LLC, whatever. But then to actually be able to access those dollars, knowing who to talk to get that kind of money, it leaves you speechless. Other than it just speaks to the absolute utter corruption of really the entire government, in my opinion.
So Ross, maybe you know the answer to this. If I'm a nonprofit and I get granted money, is that taxable or is that tax free?
If you're granted money?
Yeah.
I think
is that considered income? That's
no, no, it's not income.
Okay.
But
as a nonprofit, the government allows you at least 10% in profit that's non-taxable. But then after that, you will get taxed. Because I used to have to fill out forms for a nonprofit for 30 years. And as long as I was making under a certain amount, or the nonprofit was, I had no taxes. But if my profit showed more than 10%, that was anything above 10% was taxable.
Yeah. Inquiring minds want to know. So
yeah, right.
I'm
sure it's changed. But nonprofits are allowed to make a profit up to a point.
Right.
That's non-taxable. But
so then,
go ahead,
Dave.
I was going to say the frustration I find is that the liberals that I know, there are very few down here, very few. But my friends that I often talk with, it's like they just don't seem to care. They don't seem to care about this whole thing about the Doge thing or what they're discovering. It's like they don't care about it. It doesn't even bother them.
Because they expect it to happen? Do they expect it? So it's not a surprise?
I said, doesn't this anger my oldest daughter, who's a screaming liberal? I said, she's screaming about the taxes she has to pay and, because of tax season. And yet I'm trying to tell her, and she's just, oh, Dad, I don't want to get into politics with you. Well, how do you think these taxes are created?
How about finances? Yeah. You want to get into finances?
It's bizarre. It's bizarre that this isn't like causing the rest of the 40% or 20% of the country to say, hey, this is wrong. This is really wrong.
And then the fact that they can't seem to make a relatively basic connection of that wasting money causes my tax dollars, my tax rates to go up in order to be able to pay for this type of stuff. And the things that liberals tend to be the most passionate about that, they want the government to fund. I'll use, college tuition as an example. So many of them feel that they should be able to go to college for free. Well, free for them, but the government should have to pay for it. Well, if and not that I'm a proponent of that, but my point is that if so much money wasn't wasted by any of the things that we just showed, then you know what? Maybe we could actually offer college for free, at least at state schools, private schools, so the fact that they can't connect. Well, if we stop wasting over here, maybe we could actually address some of these things that you're so passionate about.
Well, we're going to quickly close here, but we don't want to. We're nonpartisan here, and
Sure.
we kind of dumped on the
100%.
left a little bit. So next week, I'm going to tease this. Look into zombie programs, and that's what we'll be talking about next. But Dave, what do you have for us? With that said,
instead of listening to us talking heads sometime, rant and rave, and you get all upset, contact your local, your state, and your federal elected officials. Do it. Even if you get on the phone with them, let them know your feelings about any issues that seem to be bothering you. We want to hear from you, so you can visit us on our Facebook page at the 15 minute. That's 15, the 15 minute Patriot. Visit us there. Also, you can email us and give us your own rant. Let us know what you want to hear. React to some of our own shows. And it's you can email us at 15 minute Patriot. That's 15 minute Patriot, all one word, at gmail.com. Hopefully you'll hear from us next week.
All right. Thanks.